So the Rolling Stones have released Foreign Tongues, their 25th solo album, produced by Charlie Watts, the same guy who produced Boys of Dungeon Lane for Paul McCartney earlier this year, which I also talked about. And Paul McCartney actually plays on this album, alongside the likes of Steve Winwood, Robert Smith, Bruno Mars and Chad Smith on drums in some of the tracks. Several of the songs that were on this album were actually recorded for the Hackney Diamonds album, their last album, and Mick Jagger has confirmed that there are many songs that were recorded in this session which are for the next album of the Rolling Stones. Despite being in the 80s, they plan to release more music. And I think this may be one of the coolest album covers the Rolling Stones have released in a long time. It's kind of like an animated, stylistically painted collage of their faces. It's really impressive and quite interesting against the red background. I think the funniest coincidence behind this is that this actually marks their 15th number one album, which ties them with the Beatles after all these years as the second most number ones of any British act, first being Robbie Williams. A few weeks before the release of this album, Rough and Twisted, the opening track, was actually released on a 12-inch vinyl under the pseudonym of the Cockroaches. Now, the Cockroaches are a pseudonym that the Rolling Stones used in the 1970s to release music, which led many to believe that this is potentially a nostalgia-heavy album, as they have not used the pseudonym much as they did in the 1970s. And I think the opening riff of Rough and Twisted kind of establishes this immediately, laying down the blues-heavy foundation, which the Rolling Stones have been known for since their inception, really. The second track, In the Stars, just offers an expansion upon what Rough and Twisted does, offering this kind of heavy guitar riff, although it's interesting throughout, pretty much from the start actually. We hear this kind of campy and energetic chorus, which kind of makes the single feel almost more poppy than Rough and Twisted does. The third track is when we really start to experience kind of a shift in direction, as like the two previous tracks, guitars lead it. However, it kind of it's filtered through what makes it sound like a synthesizer. So I wouldn't judge people thinking it's a synthesizer from the get-go, and it's only until really the chorus where you start to realize that it's actually a guitar, like the two previous tracks. It sounds like a synthesizer from the get-go. And I think many people will have thought that and realised a few seconds later that it's not. Mr. Charm's drive-in drums is what kind of gives character to the next track. But I think the album kind of really reaches a low point at this point. And Divine Intervention, which follows it, kind of gives more life into it. It's a very interesting vocal performance by Mick Jagger, maybe one of the most interesting of the album so far. So it's quite interesting to go from what I feel is a low point of the album to kind of one of the most poppy, kind of easy to digest vocal performances of. Ringing Hollow is quite great as they take on a country kind of sound, a folk country kind of sound, and it's interesting because this is kind of the album track which has the most nostalgic lyrics as they reminisce on their youth. And I think it kind of it gives credence to what I was saying at the beginning, and the theory of kind of the Cockroaches being used to kind of herald in this nostalgic album. Well, more nostalgic than Hackney Diamonds, which was in itself a nostalgic album. Now, the highlight of the album for me was the cover of Amy Winehouse's You Know I'm No Good. Now, this is a great cover, and they give their own flair on it with the harmonica solo kind of leading the opening. And the vocal performance by Jagger is one of the best on the album. Of course, at these ages for these guys, it's no mystery that they need a lot of help on the production side for their vocals. But however, I think Mick Jagger is kind of holds his own without needing too much help on these tracks. And I've just been listening to Back to Black quite a lot recently because of this cover, and it's a great album. At this point, the album kind of wanes, but Some of Us and Back in Your Life take it into a slower kind of pace to end the album. It's interesting that they kind of led with this kind of energetic vibe, and then as we go further on, there's not many energetic vibes towards the end of the album when it's kind of needed in an hour-long album, which is longer than average. It's kind of needed for those energetic songs to be in the mix, but you kind of, after a point, I feel you kind of the pace kind of slows down um, considerably from kind of a sprint that it was at the beginning. And I think the appeal of the album, when all said is done, is kind of the same as Paul McCartney's last album, where you listen to these kind of legends of music kind of give these great performances and interesting performances in their twilight years, even if they cannot kind of match what they were doing in their prime. You still have in like this album, as I've discussed, the high points, and in the Boys of Dungeon Lane, you kind of get the high points as well throughout the album, which you think, I wish I heard them do this in their prime. Like Ripples in the Pond, I was thinking, I would love to hear a younger Paul McCartney perform that, especially after finding out that the demo had been, that it was first demoed like 10 years ago, and it would have been interesting to hear as part of the Egypt station or even earlier in that mix.